Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on machinery sharing. This is Madeline Schultz with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. So thanks for joining us. Remember that you can type in questions and comments into the chat pod at any time, and we'll try to review those as we go along and also at the end of the session. Also, we do have kind of a small number on our webinar today, so that's lucky for you that are on the webinar because it helps us get to answer your specific questions and learn a little bit about your operations. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat box, that would be wonderful. So we will go ahead and get started with our guest speakers here. And I will introduce them. We have Dr. Georgeanne Artz, who is an assistant professor with the economics department here at Iowa State University. Georgeanne began working with machinery sharing more than 15 years ago, first working with conventional growers and more recently working with fruit and vegetable growers or smaller scale growers as the case is in our state. So she's got a lot of experience with this topic, and so we're really, really pleased to have Dr. Artz with us today. We also have Morgan Honig, and she is also from Iowa, from the southeast part of the state. And we're lucky that we got Morgan out of her greenhouse this time of year to join us for this webinar. She told us that she has learned a lot from other farmers on similar webinars, and she's happy to give back today. So we're especially happy to have Morgan with us. I asked her about something that she was very proud of, and she said she's especially proud of watching her soil transition from orange to black. So, Morgan, we're proud of you for that, too. Good job. So, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and let Georgeanne begin our webinar today. Thank you, Georgeanne, for being here.
Thank you, Madeline. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for having me. What I thought I'd do is talk a little bit about a project that I recently worked on with Linda Nave, who's also here at Iowa State in value-added agriculture, working with 6 groups of small-scale growers in Iowa to develop their own equipment sharing model. So we started working on this with small-scale fruit and vegetable growers because we were hearing people talk a lot about challenges of scaling up, and we thought that perhaps equipment sharing would be one piece of the puzzle to help people think about how to scale up. So getting bigger scale often means mechanizing at some level, either because labor becomes too expensive or just too hard to find. It also helps with timing issues. As you get bigger, timing becomes more critical, and so machinery, of course, can help with that. But the problem is it's expensive. And for many types of equipment, it can really be hard to justify owning a piece of specialized equipment when you only use it 1 or 2 times a year. So sharing can really be one solution for helping solve some of those problems. Let me say here, too, though, it's not just about scale. So even if you're not scaling up, thinking about sharing can help you reduce costs, maybe improve efficiencies in your operation, and help with quality issues, too. So lots of reasons to think about sharing equipment. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the Leopold Center grant project that we worked on, which Morgan was a part of. As Madeline said, I started working on equipment sharing about 15 years ago when crop prices for corn and soybeans didn't look so good, and conventional growers were a lot more interested in thinking about ways to save money, and machinery being very expensive. Sharing was one of the ways that they thought about economizing. And so we worked with conventional growers on sharing equipment. Well, then commodity prices turned around and people were less interested. Conventional growers were less interested in sharing equipment. So I had a conversation with Linda about other ways that this might be helpful, and her work with fruit and vegetable growers in Iowa seemed like a really good fit. So we applied for a grant to the Leopold Center, and they funded it. And what we did was solicited applications from growers around the state who were interested in developing a machinery sharing model. And so we asked people to submit an application. They needed to assemble a group of people that they could share with, and they had to agree to share. And then as part of the project, they had to write an operating agreement, so they had to come up with the rules of how they were going to share the piece of equipment and write them down and sign it. We also asked them to track their time, so they submitted logs of when they used the equipment, when they moved it around, so we could have a sense of how much time was involved in sharing a piece of equipment, particularly in the first year when you're still learning how to do it. We asked them to track their finances related to the shared equipment, and then, of course, to tell us what they learned and to share some lessons and some insights. And so we had, I think, 7 applications in all. One of them wasn't really complete, so we were actually able to work with all of the groups who had submitted applications, and we had 6 in the end. And here's just a little table that tells you what they were sharing and where they were located. As I said, they were all in Iowa, and they ranged from just 2. There was a group of 2 that shared a mulch layer in east central Iowa to a group of 8 growers in southwest Iowa who ended up sharing an Orono berry harvester. Okay, so that's a little bit about the project. What I thought I'd do is spend a few minutes talking about the who, what, where, why, and how of machinery sharing. And then I'll stop talking and I'll let Morgan tell you about her experience. Okay, so why would you think about sharing equipment? Obviously, if you're on the webinar, I suppose you've already thought about that. But so the obvious place for me to start as an economist, I suppose, is thinking about how does sharing help me save money, especially when it comes to expensive machinery. So sharing can make machinery ownership more feasible, more economical. But I should say here that it doesn't always save you money. And what I mean by that is that sometimes what sharing does for you is allows you to access machinery that you couldn't afford on your own, but you end up spending more than you otherwise would have. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but in the long run, I think there really is an opportunity to save some money in terms of owning machinery, and particularly if you're thinking about scaling up. It also provides an opportunity to share labor. So some groups share labor and some don't, and that can be a real benefit to having an equipment sharing agreement, is that you get somebody else to help you, and particularly somebody else who is also farming. And so chances are they're going to, understand where you're coming from. They're going to treat the equipment carefully in the same way that you would, and so they're going to have similar kinds of expertise, and so that can be a real benefit of sharing equipment. There may be opportunity to do custom work. So the Orono berry group that I mentioned in southwest Iowa, not only are they using the harvester for themselves, but they are using it to harvest for other people. And so that's an opportunity to add additional income stream to your operation. Sharing can also lead to, sharing a piece of equipment can lead to other kinds of sharing, and in particular, it can lead to working together to purchase inputs together, which if you're buying large enough volumes can earn you some discounts. And so there's an opportunity to save some money if you went in together, for example, to purchase plastic for a mulch layer. You might be able to save some money by buying larger volumes. And then another thing that we've observed in the work we've done with growers is that you also get access to specialized skills and knowledge that you may not have. And so one of the big benefits, I think, of sharing machinery is that you get this sort of chance to network more with people who are in the same business and who may have ideas that can help your operation and vice versa. One more thing that I don't have on the slide, but we've also observed is it's somebody to back you up. And what I mean by that is if you have a relationship with somebody you're sharing equipment with and something happens, you have an accident, you get sick, you have kind of a ready-made backup plan there in the people that you're working with. So if something happens and you're not able to harvest your crop that day, you have this group of people who will probably step in and help you. And so that's also a benefit of sharing. Okay, so what might you think about sharing? So when we started thinking about machinery sharing with fruit and vegetable growers, One of the things we were worried about is what I'll call timeliness. And what I mean by that is how critical is it that you have the piece of equipment when you need it right then and there? Do you have a window of opportunity where you can lay plastic mulch and you have a couple of weeks to get it down, or is it something that you really need it the day you need it? And so the more critical the timing aspect of it, the probably less of a candidate it is for sharing, right? Because it just creates conflicts. Frequency of use is another dimension that you want to think about. Do I use it every week? And therefore, I really just want to keep it on my farm and have it available for me to use, or is it something that I maybe use once a year? And so then it becomes pretty easy for a group to figure out a schedule where everybody gets a chance to use it. Now, that said, there are exceptions to every rule. One of the groups that we worked with on this project shared an eco-weeder. And I thought from the outside, oh, this is going to be interesting. I wonder how they're going to work this out. But it worked out really well. I think that part of the reason it worked really well was that there were only 3 of them, and they were relatively close to one another. And they had worked out a system where they could move the weeder around. And so everybody had an opportunity to use it when they needed it. Now, they were flexible to some extent, but weeding is something that there really is a timeliness issue there, and you use it a lot. And so I have to say I was surprised at how well that worked out. So even though these are my kind of rules of thumb, certainly there are exceptions, and there are ways that you can figure it out. With the harvester as well, again, that's something that you have a little bit of a window there, harvesting Orono berries, but not that much of a window, and so they do have to be really careful about scheduling use. And so to the extent that you can take advantage of variation in when you harvest, so for example, if you have control over when you would need to harvest, you can time it such that I'm going to need it this week and the person I'm sharing with is going to need it 2 weeks later, and that builds a cushion in to your scheduling plan. Now, also on the slide I have sort of what to share. So I have machinery fixed costs. So what do I mean by that? So somehow you may need to share or may want to share the initial purchase cost of the piece of equipment, so the investment in the machine. But then you're also going to want to share the costs related to owning the machine. So when I talk about fixed costs, these are costs that you pay even if you don't use the machine at all. So these are things like insurance, maybe housing costs, depreciation on the machine. And so what we've typically seen is that the groups that we work with share those equally. So if there are 2 people, they split it 50-50. If it's 3, everybody puts in a third. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that. That seems to be what people tend to do, and maybe it's because they sort of think of it as fair. And then there are all these other costs that you have, which we call variable costs, which change no matter with how much you use the machine. So these could be things like the amount of plastic that you lay with a plastic layer. It could be fuel if it's something that's a self-propelled machine. It can be labor. And so you may decide to share those in proportion to use. And that especially becomes important if you have different sized operations. Or you may split them evenly, or you may come up with some other system that works perfectly well for how you share those costs, or you may not share those costs at all. And so there are examples where people share in the ownership of the machine, but any of the labor or the gas or the materials that you need to operate the machine on your farm, you just pay for yourself. Often these groups will share transportation, so not only the responsibility for transporting around to different farms, but the cost of the transportation. In the Orono berry group, for example, they are considering buying a trailer jointly to move it around. It's a big piece of equipment. And then, of course, as I said earlier, you can share, or we think you should share expertise. Okay. So you may have picked up on this by now, but one of the big lessons here is there's not one right way to do this. There's all kinds of variation on how to share equipment. And so you see everything from people jointly purchasing a single piece of machine, but beyond the ownership in the machine, they don't share labor, they don't share anything else, and that works perfectly well. Maybe a little more common is some combination of sharing the machine and sharing the labor that goes along with operating the machine. And then as these groups evolved, some of them tend to coordinate more and share more, and so it evolves into sharing a single machine to sharing multiple machines and labor, and then buying inputs together. And in some cases, they're really integrated, and they actually pool their production. And actually, Morgan is an example of that, so she'll talk about that maybe a little bit when she talks. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can structure this from either a legal perspective or just a structural perspective, so to speak. So you may go together and purchase a piece of equipment together. You each put in 50-50. You share the cost of ownership. You move it around. So that's what I mean by joint ownership. Another way to do it is if you perhaps are going to share more than one piece of machinery. What we've seen some groups do is have what I'll call individual ownership with a sharing agreement. So let's say that I decide I'm going to purchase the mulch layer and my partner is going to purchase a seeder or something that we both agree that we would both like, but I'm going to personally own one piece of equipment and she's going to personally own the other piece of equipment, and then we're just going to work out a way to share those two pieces of equipment on our operations. An advantage of that is that it's a little bit less complicated. So if I own it, then I'm responsible for paying for it and repairing it and maintaining it and insuring it and housing it, and we don't have to negotiate that. It's just an individual ownership. So that's another way that works. Or you can be more formal and actually structure a business entity. So it might be a limited liability partnership or a cooperative or an LLC. Of the groups in this particular project, only one had a business entity for their sharing, and that was the Orono berry growers. They were a lot bigger than everybody else, and so it was a more expensive piece of equipment. And they really were thinking about doing custom work from the beginning and making this into more of a larger business, and so they did structure it as a business entity. So they have an LLC that owns the harvester, and the members are all owners of that LLC. But beyond the sort of structure considerations, there are all the details that you need to work out. And basically, this is a starting list of some of the things that you just need to sit down and talk about and work out and write down to make a plan for how you're going to share. And so you really want to think about creating an operating agreement. And some of these are kind of obvious, but you'll have to think about how you're going to schedule use. So who gets to use the piece of equipment when, and how does that get decided? How flexible can you be about that, or is it a pretty strict schedule? You may need to think about who can operate the equipment or who's qualified to operate the equipment. So some pieces of equipment actually require some skill and some expertise, and not everybody may have that. And so you may, if the group is big enough, you may elect to have one person or two people be designated operators, and they would travel around with the machine and help use the machine on everybody's farm. Of course, you have to work out how you're going to allocate costs. So how are you going to share the initial cost of the machinery? How are you going to handle repairs and maintenance, insurance, storage, things like that? And then the cost to use the machine, so fuel, labor, anything like that that's associated with that. You have to think about how you're going to move it around. So what's the plan for moving it from farm to farm? When does it transport? Who transports it? Who pays for the cost of transportation? And then there's also considerations here with entry and exit into the group. So you may start with 3 members. What if somebody wants to join? Do you have rules for that? What does that look like? How do they buy in? And likewise, what if somebody needs to exit or somebody wants to exit? So what's the exit plan if somebody needs to leave the group? How will the group pay them out of their share of the machinery, for example? Okay, so my take on this is that there's some work here to do to work out the details, but you can work out the details. You can do the math, and you can figure out something that'll work. And if you're a little bit flexible, you can modify it if something changes or you realize that what you originally had isn't working very well. And one of the things that I've come to believe about machinery sharing from the work I've done, both with the small-scale growers and with the conventional farmers is one of the big keys is finding somebody you can work with. And so this is what we call the touchy-feely part. When we worked with conventional growers, we called it machinery dating. But the challenge here is finding somebody that you can work with. And I don't. This to me is the critical part of a machinery sharing agreement. I really do think you can work out all the other details, and there's lots of resources to do that. So how do you find somebody to work with? So there are some obvious things like somebody who needs the same piece of equipment that you do, but there are some perhaps things about farm characteristics that would make sharing easier. So for an example, in the work that we did with conventional growers, there were 2 farmers in southeast Iowa who were sharing a combine, and it just happened that one farmer had sort of ground that was higher up and one had ground that was closer to the river bottom, and so every year it just happened that the timing worked out well because when the higher ground was always ready to plant earlier than the lower ground. And that timing aspect of the differences in the nature of their farms really helped in them scheduling use of the machinery. So there may be things about farm characteristics that could make sharing easier. There are things about farm characteristics that could make sharing harder. So do you have the similar production system, for example? Are you always going to have to be adjusting the piece of equipment to fit your row spacing? Or do you have similar row spacing, which would just make it easier to not and save the time of adjusting the machine every time you moved it between farms? There's some things that you want to be similar and some things that work to your advantage if they're different. You might look for somebody who has unique skills or skills that are different than yours or that complement yours. So one of the benefits of working with other people is that you can learn from them, or maybe you can specialize a little bit. So if you like to keep the books, you can be the one to keep all the financial records and the time logs for the group. And if somebody else is really good at repairing things, then they can be the one in charge of repairing the machines and maintaining the machine, for example. And so finding somebody who likes to do the things that you don't particularly like to do can be a real benefit of working in a group and sharing a piece of equipment. Do you have similar work habits? So if you're working together and you're sharing labor, for example, are you kind of on the same schedule? Do you like to work early in the morning? Do you like to work late at night? Those sorts of things can matter, make sharing easier if you have more similar attitudes toward that. And then you really do need to find somebody who can be a little bit flexible. So sharing is not for everybody. If you are the type of person that wants to have it your way all the time, no matter what, this probably isn't a good option for you. But if you are somebody who's willing to be a little bit flexible, then this can really be something that works really well and fits into your operation. Okay, so I am going to stop here, but I'm going to just point out that Lisa, I think, posted this link on the website for you. The product of this grant project, one of the products of this grant project is a manual we call Machinery Sharing Manual for Fruit and Vegetable Growers, and it's available on our Iowa State Extension online store. It's for free. It's a PDF that you can just download. It contains the case studies from the research project, but it also has all the information that I just talked about. It has some templates on how to split finances. It has sample operating agreements that you can look at and to get some ideas for how to do that, a little bit of information on legal structure, those sorts of things. And then we also have more information on our Iowa State Extension Farm Management site, which is called the Ag Decision Maker website, which I will point out there. Okay, I talked a lot. I'll stop.
You did a great job, Georgeanne, and thanks for all of those examples, because that really helped explain some of those concepts. We will go ahead to Morgan now, but be thinking of your questions that you want to ask Georgeanne, and we'll come back and answer those questions. So let's turn it over to Morgan, and she unfortunately has a cold today, so bear with her. She is a trooper, and she still wants to share this information with us. So thanks for being here, Morgan, and we look forward to hearing all that you have to say.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Good. All right, is my slide next? Okay. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of history about me. I've had a vegetable farm for, this will be my 8th year coming up. It's called Mogo Organic, and I'm also involved in a collaborative CSA group. We're called Green Share. So it's many farms working together to produce vegetables for one CSA. We have, we were already kind of working together, so equipment sharing seemed like a good idea. A little bit of my background: I was not a farmer, and I went to college to be a teacher, but I grew up in a greenhouse. The picture below is a picture of my house. It was a garden center and greenhouse. So the garden and plants and things are kind of in my blood. So that's a little bit of my background, and my family's greenhouses are in Mount Pleasant, where I'm currently farming. So I returned from college, and my grandmother had to be moved into assisted living, and she had a farm on the south end of town. So I moved into the farm just to kind of take care of the place, and then ended up planting a garden, and then it kept growing, and I put up a hoop house in 2008 and started a CSA program where I sold shares in the farm, and the first year I had 20 customers. So every week during the growing season, those 20 customers got a portion of the produce. So I was also working for my parents at their flower shop at the time, and then producing vegetables kind of for extra income to pay off student loans and that sort of thing. But the farm, the CSA was very successful. It grew every year. So my first year I had 20 customers, and by the 5th year I was up to almost 40. I was at 38 customers. But I'm just one gal growing for almost 40 families, so it got a little crazy, and there's a lot of there's a lot of labor involved, and by 2012 there was a drought year, and I had lots of customers, and my production was minimal, and it was just a really stressful year. So I was going to be out of the CSA business after that year. I decided, it's just too much pressure to have to provide for that many people. And if you have a bad weather, then you're sort of at the whim of, you'd feel terrible. I felt terrible not being able to give customers the produce that I thought that they should receive for each week. They paid in roughly $20 a week, and some weeks they wouldn't get that value in produce. So 2012 was a rough one, and I was about to call it a draw and just only sell at farmers markets. But then a couple other hobby farmers approached me and asked if I would help them with a multi-farm CSA. So they were two gals who had organic vegetable gardens, and they had hoop houses, but they didn't really have an active market for growing for a CSA, and they didn't have the experience either. So they talked me into joining them, and we started Green Share CSA. And our farms were roughly 25 miles apart, so we were fairly close. And we kind of worked together. It was a really neat proposition for me, because when you're running a CSA, you want to offer your customers lots of variety. So some years I was managing 50, 60 different crops, plus doing the bookwork, plus writing a newsletter every week, and it was a little overwhelming. So this idea of collaborating with other farms was really great. one of the farmer from Crawfordsville, she used to be an accountant, so she took over the bookkeeping end of things, and the gal in Ainsworth took over the newsletter and the sort of the marketing part. And then since I was the most experienced at growing, I became the crop manager. So I helped people to figure out how much they needed to plant in order to provide for our CSA, and I kind of made the decisions on what would be harvested each week or what would be in the shares each week. So it was a really wonderful thing. We spread all the work around. We also were able to spread out I didn't have to grow 50 crops anymore. We all could kind of specialize in crops a little bit better and grow our crops better too, because I could focus, if I was mostly growing brassicas and lettuce, and that's a different maintenance schedule than if you're growing root crops and that sort of thing. So we spread out the load a lot, and it was really wonderful. So 2013, we had 50 customers, and because we had farms in different areas, we were also able to offer pickup locations, our markets. So my food was all of a sudden being sold in areas, up by Ainsworth, and we even had a pickup location in the Iowa City area, which is here in our area. Iowa City is a big market. It's a college town in there. You can sell lots of kale there. So it was kind of a neat little operation. We were able to kind of create a little bit of a network, and we all would convene at the central location in Crawfordsville, and then we would all separate and distribute in our respective communities. So this initial partnership between me, Long Creek Acres, and Providence, we were all single lady, female farmers. We were doing everything on our own, and we realized that it's a lot of work when you're doing organic vegetables, and we wanted to come up with ways that we could help to make our workload just a little bit easier. So we did do a lot of sharing of labor. If someone needed a greenhouse skin put on, or they had a big weeding project or something, we would work together. But we also were starting to think about sharing equipment too. I personally wanted to purchase some equipment to help me with cultivating and with harvesting root crops, because my soil was very clay soil, and digging root crops was a big chore, a back-breaking chore for sure. So we started to look into finding a piece of equipment that we could all share that would kind of make those tasks a little bit easier. So we purchased a crop lifter and multi-purpose tool. So the main reason we purchased this was for the picture on the left. It's a crop lifter. It's a big blade that hooks on your 3-point hitch, and you drag it in the dirt behind your tractor, and it kind of undercuts the soil and lifts the crops up a little bit so they're easier to dig. I mean, once you run that under a row of potatoes, you can just kind of stick your hand in the soil and pick out the potatoes instead of having to go in there with a garden fork. So that's the main thing we purchased it for, but the toolbar that the crop lifter was attached to, we could also attach S-tines and cultivating tools, and there's some discs, so you could make some hilled raised beds, sort of, and there was a furrower attachment too for planting potatoes. So that was our main thing. We thought, we're breaking our backs here. We need something that makes our lives a little bit easier. So this is the tool we set about purchasing. And I think Lisa might have a video of how this tool works in case you're interested. It's from YouTube. It's not mine, but it just kind of shows you how the tool works. This fellow's going to drag it under the soil. I think they're harvesting parsnips here. But there's been so many times in my life where I've lifted, I've tried to pull a root crop out of the ground, and you just yank the tops off, and the root's still in there. So this is an amazing tool, and there was a little bit of a learning curve too. The first time I harvested carrots using this tool, I didn't dig it low enough, and I chopped the ends off of every single carrot in a 100-foot row. So it took a little bit of practice, but it sure does help with harvesting, especially potatoes and carrots. So that's our crop lifting tool. So that's pretty much what we used it for the first year. And we didn't have much time we didn't really use many of the other attachments just because, things get away from me during the season. And to use the cultivation tools, we would have had to have planted our garden with, the proper spacing in mind. And that's something that I'm still struggling with, learning to plant straight rows and that sort of thing. But we have used the furrower to plant potatoes a number of times, and I've used the discs to hill a little bit. So it's just kind of a neat tool, and we're still kind of learning how to use it. And the first year that we shared it, it didn't get traded around too much because my tractor broke down. So I ended up having to borrow a tractor from the other farms and the crop lifter was already attached to it. So it's kind of another benefit of being in a group of farmers all working towards the same cause. So these are kind of the terms of our agreement for this crop lifter. So just my farm and Long Creek Acres actually purchased the item, and Long Creek Acres had a lot more outbuildings, and it was more centrally located, so we decided that that would be where the equipment was stored. Providence, that farm, she had planted her gardens in, instead of a big field, she had just had tilled strips in her yard with turf in between, and so the tool really wasn't going to work terribly well in her operation, so she decided not to be a part of the purchasing, but if she wanted to use it, we left that option there since she was part of the partnership. So we had figured out a cost. I think it was like $40 if she wanted to rent it for the week. Or if she decided she did need it, we left it open that she could buy into the piece of equipment as well. And as far as scheduling goes, because in our vegetable gardening, farming, harvest is continuous, cultivation is continuous. So this tool could be potentially used all the time, all summer long. So we set it up that every other week it would be at one farm or the other, but weather permitting and that sort of thing. We left it open-ended, but if there was ever a dispute, we would refer to the schedule as to whose week it was, and if it needed any maintenance, we were to keep track of that. But really, it was new, so we didn't. And it doesn't have too many moving parts, which made it really easy to maintenance was minimal. Just keeping it from getting rusty was the main thing, and we kept track of how much we used it. So if a farm wanted to use the piece of equipment, we decided that they would be responsible for going to the farm, going and picking it up from whichever farm it was at. And if you didn't have the means to haul it yourself, we kind of figured out a price of, a fair price of what it would cost for that, the farmer who had the piece of equipment to bring it to you. So 50 cents a mile and $12 an hour is what we decided. But luckily, that piece of equipment wasn't too unwieldy. It's heavy and bulky, but I I hauled it in the back of I have a little Pontiac Vibe, a little car with a hatchback, and I can haul the piece of equipment in the back of my car very easily. So that wasn't too big of an issue. And we decided that if there were to be any maintenance costs, we would split them 50-50 since we were both half owners. And if we had accumulated any rental funds from the other farm, we would have used those funds to pay for maintenance as well. But that didn't happen, but we had that in there. And then our termination agreement was that if the other farmer wanted out, one farmer would have to purchase it from the other at a cost of, with the depreciated cost, so about 10% per year. So that was our agreement. And I'm very glad that we had that agreement because it just made decision-making a lot easier because both those farms, Long Creek Acres and Providence, are no longer farming. So it was really easy to figure out how I was to legally acquire that piece of equipment. So it is now my piece of equipment. So this is kind of how the life of our crop or our equipment sharing. It was mostly used for lifting root crops. So we didn't have to do too much maintenance on changing, the extra toolbar pieces. Let's see, and then it didn't get traded around too much also because my tractor broke down for about 2 months. So I didn't get to use it too much that first year. And then Providence quit farming after our first year. And then Long Creek Acres just stopped farming this fall. So we're moving on into the new season, and I've got a nice piece of equipment, and and I've learned a lot in sharing that piece of equipment on how we're going to manage things. And our Green Share collaboration has changed as well. So we've added new farmers to the agreement, and because we're still a lot of farmers working towards a greater good, I've decided that crop lifting tool, I would be happy to loan it to anybody else in our cooperative if they would like to use it. And I'm just kind of using the same rental guidelines that we had in our initial equipment share agreement for that. So if anybody in my cooperative wants it, I'm happy to let them use it. And so this is our farm makeups last year after Providence broke off. We added a farm up closer to the Iowa City area, which is really nice for our marketing purposes in the Iowa City area. We added Muddy Miss Farms in 2014, and then last year, after the season was over, Long Creek Acres dropped out, and now we've expanded our network. We actually have 5 farms working with us. One farm is a pork and chicken farm as well, so we offer a meat CSA and an organic vegetable CSA. So we've learned that working together has been such a great asset. When one farmer has a hard time or has a crop failure or has personal issues, and has to kind of pull back a little bit, and the other farmers in the group are able to kind of fill in the gaps. And if we ever have a big project or something that needs to be done, we all kind of work together and share our efforts. And it's just nice. It's just really nice to always have farming can be lonely sometimes, so it's really nice to have a group of like-minded people all working towards the same cause. So that's our Green Share. And one interesting thing that's kind of come out of all of this is Long Creek Acres, since they've kind of broken off. They have some equipment that we are looking to purchase from them for use in the cooperative. there's a mulch layer, and I don't really have the funds to purchase a mulch layer on my own. I have a mulch layer, but it's a homemade one, and it doesn't work very well. And Long Creek Acres had a practically new one. So the Green Share farmers are all we've all put our heads together, and we've decided that we're going to purchase the mulch layer from Long Creek Acres, and it will be property of Green Share, and then it will be available to all the farms to use. And that's we're still kind of drafting that agreement. We have yet to purchase the item, but it's just all along the same model of just trying to share and help each other out and grow more food with less effort, hopefully. And let's see, I see a question. Did I own all my tractors already? I am very lucky. This doesn't happen to most people in the world, but when I moved on to the farm, there was already 2 tractors on the farm. They had been sitting in the barn for over 20 years, but they started right up. So I'm very lucky. I have had to put a lot of effort into repairing things, and thank goodness for YouTube, I was able to find a lot of videos on how to fix things. So that's just something I know. Muddiness Farms, the other farm in my cooperative right now, she's struggling with that right now, looking for a tractor at a reasonable cost. So we've been watching Craigslist like hawks, trying to find her a good deal, because having a tractor that's dependable is very important for using any of this equipment. And it says, where did I meet all the farmers that I work with? Mostly in just socializing at farming events. I go to a lot of organic conferences. Practical Farmers of Iowa is another organization that provides a lot of webinars and that sort of thing. And in trying to educate myself and learn about farming, I've met a lot of other people. So that's just kind of been, I've just been kind of lucky. And talking to other farmers, even farmers who sit next to me at the farmers market. They've all kind of become comrades, and we all pick each other's brains about how to get rid of this bug or that bug. So that's one good thing about farmers markets, is you get to learn a lot from other people who are all kind of like-minded. So, and what's great about this partnership too, Green Share has become it's just really exciting, because my farm is the farthest away from our main marketing area in Iowa City. I'm an hour away, but because there's farms that are located halfway between there, I'm able just to drive my produce 30 minutes to the Ainsworth area, and then the farmer that's there can drive it up to the Iowa City area. So it's been pretty wonderful to have this little network of farmers all working together, because our meat producers are from Tama, which is 2 hours away from my farm, but they will bring their produce or their meat products to the Iowa City area, and then through our network it gets down to Mount Pleasant, my town, and I'm able to distribute their meat in my area as well. And it's really, since we're all already driving to those areas, it just works out pretty well. And so with the equipment sharing as well, that's, we're all kind of driving our food to those areas anyway, so sharing the equipment is just as easy. You can just haul that along with the food. So,
well, thank you, Morgan. Your story is very inspiring. It's just great how you truly have been able to build your equity through some equipment sharing, through some partnering with other farmers, and so that's very inspiring. But also, I recognize that takes a lot of good communication and good management on your part.
Yes.
So I just had a question for you about how maybe some tips on communicating with others and, being a good manager in collaboration with others. Any particular tips on that?
Well, what was good for us is I feel like, there's a lot of trust involved. I've realized, it's, we were all of us farmers were definitely friends first, and then we became business partners, which things can get a little bit complicated that way, but it was really helpful to be a part of Georgeanne's her project, because I'm not sure if we would have written up a formal formal document expressing all of those things, depreciation and everything. I think just because we were friends, we were able to be open and honest about things. I think, it sounds terrible. We had a lot of faith in each other to start out with, but I'm really glad and we had a really good communication, and unfortunately personal issues came into the way of the other two farms. But it was still, we were able to communicate that well and proceed on very easily because we had a formal agreement on how to do that. So no feeling for hurt or anything. So
excellent. Glad to hear that, and great testimony to hear about the value of just having a plan and having it written down, and then when things changed, you were able to use that plan to make those changes. So that is great to hear. Georgeanne, I had just one question for you, and we're getting close to our hour that we have set aside for this webinar, but I wondered if you could tell us, Georgeanne, a little bit more about the entry and exit plans and maybe how that worked for other farmers. It seems like an important component of those documents.
Well, Morgan talked about an exit plan, and that's probably the most common exit plan. It's just having a plan in place for what happens if somebody needs to leave or wants to leave, and how are you going to buy them out of their share of the equipment if it's jointly owned. In terms of entry, so one question is, are you going to allow entry? So, for example, in the group with the eco-weeder, they pretty much said we couldn't handle another person. This works well with 3 people, but if we added another 1 or even 2 people, it would be too difficult. And so their discussion about entry was whether or not to allow entry at all. If it seems like it would work in terms of entry, then you need some sort of plan in place to think about how does a person buy in to the equipment sharing arrangement. So maybe they, if you have 3 and you have a 4th coming in, maybe they come in and purchase 25% of the equipment at the depreciated cost, and so that they pay the other partners out for a share, so to speak. So that would be one option. Or maybe it becomes a rental agreement like Morgan had in her case too, which could also work for entry. And then when when that piece of equipment needed to be replaced, then when the replacement happened, that person would invest. So that would be another example.
Okay, thanks for those examples, Georgeanne. I have one more question for you. And with your experience with these growers, did you ever run into problems with machinery damage or costly repairs and concerns about how the group would manage that?
Never a case of damage. Certainly all kinds of other issues. One of the groups that we worked with in this particular research project, there were originally 5 people, and it ended up being just 3. And there was some miscommunication about what they were actually sharing. So this was a lesson in failure, I guess, and then how not to communicate. But originally, it was that they were going to purchase a garlic separator, and then what ended up happening was one of the farmers built it. So there was some miscommunication about who they were paying and what they were paying for, and then it was a matter of whether or not it made sense for them to take their garlic to this person's farm and separate it there, whether they had enough. It didn't make sense for some of them to incur that transportation cost and home because one of them said, well, I can just sit in front of my TV and separate garlic, and it's not really worth it for me. So that was the one case that we had that really was a matter of communication more than anything else. Why that one didn't quite
that's
work out.
an example where communication wasn't good, and in Morgan's case, she did have some great communication. So that's a key ingredient to successful equipment sharing.
It is. It's very important. It's almost like a marriage.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Georgeanne and Morgan. We really appreciate you sharing all of your valuable experience, research, and just wisdom in machinery sharing. It's been really great, super information, and we hope it helps those that were on the call today, as well as others who may be listening to this webinar later on. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. We will be hosting our next Women in Ag Learning Network next month, and that will be on the topic of, let's see, next month it is networking, right? Networking. So let me see if we have a slide here that says that. Balancing competing time commitments, sorry. So after that, we'll be talking more about networking. We look forward to having you join us next time. We're glad that you joined us today and hope it helped a lot. And once again, thanks to our excellent speakers. So hope you all have a great rest of the day, and goodbye for now.